So I was thinking quite a lot about the idea of transmutation. I kind of thought scientifically as well, how is it possible? Because you've got the idea of fission and fusion, which is essentially when an atom either combines into a new material, so you take two elements and you combine them to a new one, or you take one element and you split it into two, right? And a lot of energy is produced in this, and this is all just hypothesis. Oh, this is all just theory. This, not to say it isn't done or anything, but I'm saying, an atom is just a word. It's just a concept. Let's get into the actual practicalities of how would this stuff work and give you some meat. So alchemists always talk about how minerals generate under the earth the same way that a potato would grow, or a tree would grow, or a human or an animal or something, right? The idea of farming minerals. And it's just that it's very slow. They also thought that modern science acknowledges crystals grow and different types of minerals grow in ways, but they don't really acknowledge the fusion of minerals, so to speak, as in they don't think that gold grows from other things or that silver grows from other things. They instead only believe that from the stars, which were these giant fusion reactors, that all the gold that ever was sprayed out into the world, and part of that condensed into the earth, and there's only so much gold, and it's not a renewable resource and all this stuff, right? The alchemists believe that there was this fusion, or what they call transmutation, of different minerals into other minerals, right? Okay, so if we take a solid material, a piece of iron, it's difficult to take a solid piece of iron metal and to merge it or combine it with a solid piece of copper metal. In a physical state, these things do not mix. If you heat physical things up, it will become a liquid, and a liquid can sometimes mix with another liquid. Now, of course, if you powderize physical things, they can mix, but they don't become the same thing, so to speak. Some things do mix, like if you mix different kinds of flours together and you make a bread, and that bread will kind of be a coagulation or condensation of the collection of different flours once you've heated it and done this process. If you ground the bread up, could you separate out all of the different grains? I mean, maybe if they're large enough, but if the grain has mixed kind of into a paste, then it all coagulates together, right? Or combines together, excuse me. When you heat things up, they become liquid usually. When you heat things up further than that, they become gas. There's other ways you could use, like vacuum mechanics and such, to rip gases out of things. So it's not just, and also you can mix water into things to make things into liquid. But usually when you heat it, this is what you do. Alchemically, this is what we're doing when we're distilling something. We're distilling the water, and then we're distilling the airs, and then all this stuff. It's like the procedural incremental distillation, and you coagulate these. You coagulate the waters, or make physical, recondense, coagulate the airs into like a liquid as well. But if you heat gases, what happens when you have a lighter or a gas stove? You apply a spark to a gas, it ignites into a plasma. Plasma flames are gases being ignited. That's what an alcohol lamp is. That's what a butane gas stove. I mean, you can condense these gases into a liquid, and your alcohol is temporarily a liquid. Essentially, it's a volatile thing burning, so to speak, right? Also, if you heat a gas, so I think it's about 5 to 10,000 degrees, it turns into a plasma. There's different ways, of course. See, a fusion reactor would use uses electrodes, which is like two rods of maybe tungsten or something very electrically and heat proof. You have a high voltage in like the tens of thousands a spark between them, and it ignites a gas. Usually they use like hydrogen or helium or whatever in like a common fusion reactor. And in this plasma state, in this fire state, things can start to mix a little more. It's like the same way in a liquid state, things can mix to some extent. In a air state, things mix even more. So certain chemicals are made by heating things up into a gas and then recondensing it back down. This is what sublimation is, right? When you heat certain things up and they vaporize and then eventually they recondense into like these weird crystals. But what happens if you heat things up so hot that they become the highest state of matter, assumably? If you go into theoretical physics, you could say that beyond plasma there's a super plasma, a super spiritual state, and below physical there's like a rare matter, like super dense state. Who knows? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. These things are possible. It depends on how hot or how cold you get something, I guess. If it's pure theoretics and like computer models, you can do whatever you want. But at least realistically, you can get something really, really, really hot until it becomes a plasma, right? So apparently what happens is that the electron loses some of it, or the electron shell, I think, loses some of its electrons, which I guess is a way of saying the electric field of, technically would it be the electrostatic field or something? I don't know. It's like the electric component loses some of its defense, right? And it becomes vulnerable, and then these things, they no longer electrostatically repulse. So it becomes like in an ionized state, it becomes, is it positively charged? Yes, they become positively charged and can no longer electrostatically repulse from one another. So again, we're dipping back into models, which I don't really like, and I really like the model of the atom, but it is useful. It is useful, and it's just that it's taught in an over-theoretical way, so it's a bit of a pain in the butt. I guess you could think like fires, the spirits of these things, is the raw spiritual energy of this stuff is combining into a new spiritual energy, right? And assumably, if you had two different elements, like two different metals, and you made it into a plasma and you recombine them, or a bunch of hydrogen, and you combine them, you could make different elements, right? I'm not going to say this would be super efficient to make a bunch of stuff. You'd be better off setting up a gold mine or something like that, but it definitely could be a thing. Now, I always had the idea of like a chamber where you heated things up and got them into a super high state, and then when in that super high state, you could somehow from the outside manipulate them to like frequency or something. Essentially, just imagine a fusion reactor chamber, vacuum chamber, where you've heated things up to a certain point, to the plasma state, and then around it, I guess you would have like an electromagnetic coil, some kind of radio antenna, right, to project frequency into it. I don't know if it would be control of the magnetic field at different pulsing hertz or sine wave hertz, or control of like radio waves. And of course, as I think I said, you could use microwave energy. You could use electromagnetism of radio or frequency to excite the gas into plasma instead of using electrodes, the same way that you've got those lights. There's like tests where people have tubes full of, if you get a light, one of those, was it incandescent lights, the ones full of like the weird gases like xenon or neon or whatever, and then you put it near a Tesla coil. So you put it near like EMF radiation. I mean, you wouldn't want to put it in the microwave, but it would work in a microwave, right? And then it starts to light up. And if you look up plasma toroid or plasma donut or like plasma manipulation, there's videos of people using electromagnetic fields with these sealed glasses, and they create interesting shapes, and there's like people making plasma balls at different pulses. Essentially, you can manipulate plasma, and we're still kind of, I mean, we've figured most of it out. It's not really a common thing, the same way that, plumbing to control water is pretty much down pat, right? And your average like handyman can probably figure out how to do that. plasma is still a little, I mean, who knows? It's like when you look into this stuff, you realize that everything's been figured out already and that like nothing is new. It's until you figure it out, then it's like life allows you to see the stuff that's already there. But anyway, point being is that you can manipulate this, you can manipulate the shape of plasma. I don't see why we couldn't manipulate the fusion reaction of plasma to the point where you could have like a device that you buy. It'll be like a 3D printer, right? Where you just create atoms and molecules and who knows what, and depending on the temperature, depending on like the frequency, and it'll be like computer controlled, like a 3D printer, or like an oven, or like a coffee machine, essentially. And you could probably manufacture them for like under $100 in China or something, right? Like this isn't really. It's not super complicated. This is what I'm trying to get. It's literally just like get stuff into a plasma state and like compress it or something, or use frequency to tune it to a certain element. Again, I don't fully understand that one yet. I think maybe if I understood particle physics a bit more, I'd probably understand it. Anyway, the last thing is actually on what I call like room temperature, or what they would call cold fusion. And there's some videos and some stuff out there. Cold fusion's kind of debated and not really taken seriously. It's seen as like a pseudoscience, but there are legitimate tests that show that it actually has worked. So ozone, when you have like two electrodes and you're zapping the air and you turn off the lights, you see a blue glow kind of in between those electrodes, and that's the electrostatic field, right? That weird blue electrical fuzz glow thing, right? That you see off supercharged objects. That's plasma, or like, you know, I guess it shows the electrostatic field, but it's just like a plasma produced by electricity, yeah. And if you touch that, I mean, it'll zap the shit out of you, but it's not. I mean, it's technically hot when you touch it, and it'll burn you, but it's not really that hot, so to speak. As in, it's not as hot as like heating up something to, 1,000 degrees. But I don't know, maybe locally where the plasma is, it's super hot. Look, point being for this thought segment is that I'm pretty sure you could use like high charge and electrostatic fields to do this stuff in a cold way. As I said, with ozone is produced from, I guess, the excitement of oxygen in the air from the high voltage and like the nitrogens and all this stuff. You can like do nitrogen electrolysis to make ammonia, or not. I think technically it's nitric acid or nitrous, some like nitrogen gas or something that you can condense into nitric acid. You can look that up. It's like the ammonia method. But rolling it back, point being is maybe there's like slight amounts of transmutation of metals happening on electrodes because of the electricity going back and forth between them, raising this stuff to super high voltage. Assumably some of the metal is being vaporized and then turned into a plasma and then maybe even fused together. I'm pretty sure there's been like tests of certain electrodes to show that there's all kinds of weird elements. It's just like you get like a full spectrum of different elements in like trace amounts on like certain electrodes. At least if you look into the John Hutchison stuff, his metal pieces, which I believe he's subjected to like super high voltage, high frequency radio frequency radiation, which is pretty much it's not exactly what we're talking about, but it is also, because I'm kind of seeing like the radio, like high voltage, high like RF is a bit like the feminine version of like raw electrostatic, right? It's like the aura it's like high energy aura versus high energy like zappy. It's like more masculine because it's small. It's like a thin line, like a nerve, instead of a large like outward expressing field of energy. It's a compressed energy versus expansive expressed outward energy. But basically it's just like raising things up to a super high state, because it's like in the high, it's like you think the earth, the world, the material world is like a sphere in the base, right? Like a bottom sphere. Imagine like the Diablo health and mana. I flew 2 bars. It's like, imagine at the bottom, it's like the world is this condensed, coagulated physical sphere of like water and earth, and in the top you've got like a higher sphere of air and fire. I mean, technically this is the world, isn't it? The earth and the seas, and then you've got the skies and the heavens, or what we call like the stars and space is like the realm of fire, right? Plasma and all that stuff. You know, stars, presumably they're plasmas, right? So if you raise to the high levels, and again it's the brain, in the brain is the fire, the heart, chest area is the air, the kind of like the belly I think is like the water, and then your butt and like lower regions and your genitals is like the earth, right? So when you raise something up into the head, or the spiritual fire level, it's like raising it to infinite potential. It's kind of like on a computer, which is, computer's like the realm of fire. You know, telecommunications is like, I guess, like the realm of air, so to speak. So it's like a lower. First we had the phone and the calculator, and then we had the computer, right? You raise things up to this highest level, and it's like infinite potential. It's like a blank canvas. You can do whatever you want. You just have to like nudge it to the frequency you want, or like imagine what you want it to be, right? And then it condenses down into this like physical material sphere, a bit like how the sun rises and sets, and also like rain condenses into clouds and then rains back down, or the vapors condense into clouds and come back down. It's like a cyclical thing, I guess. But ultimately, it's when you purify, and that's kind of how, I guess, how we get into like alchemy and all that. I think like the alchemists were doing this. I think they were doing, because they speak about like a ball of plasma that releases oil in the top of the flask. Like, that's crazy, right? That's they're heating it, and they somehow producing a chemical reaction to raise things up to the highest, most pure state, which is this this red fire state, right? And then it's coagulating into air, which is lower state, and then into water droplets, and then it's crystallizing back into a physical earth. And I've seen that. That's the thing. I've seen the plasma, the little sparks of plasma, condense into like blood red crystal, right? Like, it's crazy to see. Literally, it's insane to see. I think this is what they were doing. And then going back to the whole cold fusion thing. So underground, if you understand batteries is like, you've got two metals and you've got like an electrolytic separation right in the middle of them, and it's like acidic or alkaline or salty. I mean, it's all salty, but like you have neutral salt, potassium, sodium, calcium salts or whatever, right? Calcium might be alkaline, I'm not sure. Going on, assumably underground, because it's like, the battery creates electricity, or releases electricity, or it stores it in a chemical form. I think underground there might be like electrochemistry going on, is the simplest way I can put it. Here, let me check my notes. Yeah, underground, so it's like, I think underground, essentially what's happening is this cold fusion, and the way where I saw cold fusion was electrolysis. I know that the guy Crypto Alchemist deals a lot with this kind of stuff. He actually talked about a lot of interesting things like metal hydrides forming on I think he said his negative electrode, while the oxide was forming on the positive electrode, which is really interesting. And he thought the hydride was like the philosopher's stone, or the red state of matter, essentially. And there's also like I saw some videos from him that he posted from other people once on the stream, which was high voltage electrolysis, I think, in like potassium or sodium hydroxide. It's like, if you look up star in a jar, I think that you might be able to find that, because it creates an arc. It's like you're arcing electricity in water, very high alkalinity, right? And assumably what's happening is that the electrodes are volatilizing and becoming, well, I mean, they're volatilizing, becoming plasma, I guess, or the hydrogen is becoming plasma, because it's high pH. It parts hydrogen, right? So high alkalinity just means like tons of hydrogen. So you're adding tons of hydrogen through the alkali, and then you're volatilizing the hydrogen, I guess, and oxygen, and whatever else is in there, potassium even. You're volatilizing all these things, but assumably it's probably the act of the hydrogen, the same way that you have the gas hydrogen fusion reactors. Maybe this is like a water. I mean, technically, I guess that is. Yeah, it's like just a water fusion reactor. Huh. That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. Wow, so it's like, I guess you could have air fusion reactors and water fusion reactors probably. Maybe you could fuse different salts together, or you could use different chemicals like a vinegar or ammonia or hydrochloric acid or something, and do the high voltage electrolysis. That'd be really interesting to look this up, check this stuff out. But anyway, so what I thought is that, yeah, maybe through electrolysis, but even maybe if it's not even high voltage, because again, as I said, Crypto Alchemist, he just lets jars of stuff electrolyze for like days and days, and I've tried to do that, but it's like the energy is so powerful, like it's really difficult to maybe if I did something really small, it's really difficult to like have that go on. It's like your life goes like nuts because like the energy is so powerful, right? Just like if you're sensitive to spiritual energy, it's difficult. Of course, they do this stuff in industry, electroplating, and metal recovery and refining and all that. So I guess they deal with it somehow. But going on, yeah. So like underground, maybe there's some kind of electrolysis going on, because again, metals will produce electric current when you have two dissimilar metals, right? If you have a noble and a non-noble metal, so like a metal that corrodes easily and a metal that doesn't corrode, it produces electricity because it's got a difference in voltage, and then you stack more of these difference in voltages and you get higher voltage power from electrochemical power, right? So I assume that because there's all different kinds of ores and metals, and assumably there's like gas channels of hydroxide, I've heard, and there's probably like salt channels of, I mean, like even the beach, the water from the salty water from the beach would be acting as an electrolyte that'd be sinking in and creating different minerals in places. And then maybe there's from the really hot, like the hot underground places, they'd be volatilizing like the chlorides and the fluorides and sulfates and such, and that would be acting as like an electrolyte, like a vaporous electrolyte for the minerals underground. And it's possible that over time, because of the small electrical current that's happening, along with physical process of things being turned into like slurries and maybe dried, or like the moistening and drying. It's not all electricity, but I think that's definitely a part of it. I think, yeah, basically it's like electrochemistry is generating new elements through a form of, it's technically not cold, but it'd be like room temperature. I mean, you could make it cold if you want. Room temperature, or underground, it'd be like hot-ish plasma. What I'm saying is, or fusion, I mean, hot-ish fusion or room temperature fusion. It compared to heating something up to 10,000 degrees in a star, which is what we would think of as traditional fusion, or I guess technically that'd be hot fusion, we'd call that. It'd still be, it could still be hundreds of degrees underground, even nearly 1,000 degrees or something in certain places, but maybe some places as well it would also be cold. If there's like maybe around the beach, it could be colder, or maybe around higher mountains, it would be again colder. Probably around alkaline areas, I would imagine it'd be cold. I don't know, who knows. But point being is that that's my hypothesis on how things grow underground, and I don't fully understand it. I think now is the time that we're just going to have to do tests of, basically you're going to have to do electrolysis tests, electrochemical tests, chemistry tests, fusion tests, all these kinds of things, right? And it'll be interesting as technology progresses, because we're getting fusion reactors, right? Which is really just it's just, again, a chamber full of like electromagnets. I think that's what those plates are, and they're just trying to create that toroid, that donut of plasma. And what happens is when you inject gas into it, or like volatilize it, or excite it into ionize it to a plasma state, and then when it fuses together, it releases tons of energy, which I imagine is I don't know if it's in the form of heat or radiation, because if it's in the form of heat, we really need to up our games. The heating water to move a turbine is so ghetto, like it's so ridiculous. Maybe I think that's kind of like the huge problem, because you could assumably just get energy from radiation, right? You could just get like a rock that's like mildly radioactive, and I don't know, just like leave it there, right? I mean, the sun's radiation, the electrostatic field in the sky. There's ideas of like, the Earth being the negative, the air being the dielectric insulator, like a piece of paper, and then the upper electrostatic field being the positive. And it's like, why don't we just tap into that? And that's what Tesla was doing, yeah. So yeah, I think definitely something for the future is like, we need to just figure out how to harvest energy, right? So you just have like an antenna and you just plug it into a battery. And then we definitely need better batteries. That's another thing. Electrochemistry is kind of ghetto. I wonder if there's something better we can do to store batteries in a more solid state form. I guess there's work on that if you're looking at like solid state batteries, but I don't know. Look, point being, there's a lot of improvements we can make. And I hope it's going to simplify things, because like, it's so simple. It's just like physical matter heated up, water heated up, air form heated up, plasma form. All right, now things can mix a lot easier. I mean, things can mix when they're in air form, but when you condense them, it's just like you're more like atomically mixing things to make molecules, or molecularly mixing things. If it's like water, it's like more molecularly mixing things, right? I guess you could say, but I don't know. Some people talk about like chemistry technically is like working with quantum mechanics of, sometimes you are messing around with atoms, and it could also depend on the solvent. Because again, alchemists, I think they spoke about like producing a solvent from the philosopher's stone to then make more philosopher's stone, which is pretty wild, right? So like, I guess you could extract a liquid from it, or use it itself as a solvent. I don't know. That's somehow they spoke about that, but I don't fully understand that. Unless it's like acetone for the acetate path, or I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I hope you got something from that. Of course, check the links in the description for social and commercial stuff, and have a nice day.